Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is facing torture, insanity, and death. That is, if he doesn't chicken out first.
Tim Longo.
Yeah, don't chicken out, man. You gotta.
I did not chicken out.
Good. A lot of kids do, and then Oleander makes them go through it anyway.
I can see why.
Yeah, it's a terrifying environment. We are starting a new series this week about 2005's Psychonauts. We'll get into the double fine of it all in a moment, but we do want to say that we'd set this game in its time, except that it's the same time as Splinter Cell. It came out earlier in the year than Splinter Cell. I think this game came out in April.
Chaos Theory specifically.
Yeah, Chaos Theory specifically, which is to say, we just talked about 2005 4 episodes ago, and I'm just not going to repeat myself. You know, you can go back and look. In fact,
Just
every time we
listen.
played a game from 2005, I've called out Psychonauts as being from that year, and now we're finally doing it. So
it's come full circle.
I promise this will be the last time we do 2005 for a little while, and maybe next week we'll do something where we do repeat a year, but we do set it more in its time. But instead, we're going to set double fine a little bit in that time because, of course, we have a little bit of history here in that, of course, you know, it was founded by Tim Schafer in 2000. And, of course, he was coming off of Grim Fandango and a sizable vacation, is my recollection. Sort of came back to LucasArts. In the meantime, they decided to reboot Full Throttle, or to do a Full Throttle sequel without his input, which was their right to do, and he has always said that in interviews. So it's not a like, oh, how dare they, but more of like sort of made him realize, oh, of course, I make these things, but they're owned by a corporation, and the corporation then has a final say in anything having to do with it. And he sort of felt like he wanted to go and try to do something on his own. So that's what he was working on, a concept at LucasArts that had some echoes, I think, in Psychonauts. Both of us had seen some of the materials for that. Can't go probably into that to too much detail, but there were distinct things that are not present. The original pitch was quite different from this game. I don't even think it was a platformer.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a cool spy game. So it had some of the Psychonauts energy in that way, because it was still like a mental spy game, but it was not set with kids at a summer camp and going into brains and all that stuff in this way. There were some animal influences that were kind of like factions or something. It was a very different game, but it had like a little seed that if you squint, you can sort of see Psychonauts in it. Psychonauts was originally funded by Microsoft, by Ed Fries. I think when we interviewed him on the cast, I actually thanked him for Double Fine or for Psychonauts.
Oh, that's right. I think you did.
Yeah, and that I either did off air or on air. And then later, when management changed at Xbox and they canceled a bunch of projects, Majesco picked it up and saw it over the finish line. And Majesco, like, my recollection is they were doing a lot of like DS carts for like video, or maybe even GBA carts for video and things like that. It was a weird thing to see them pick up this game, but I'm glad it did see completion. I don't know if there's anything else about the history that you know, but that's the sort of stuff that I could remember.
No, I can't think of anything specific. I mean,
I'm asking you to remember.
yeah, very funny. Well, I mean, the thing I'll mention in terms of, I guess, the LucasArts of it all is they're definitely, I'm trying to think of the order here. There definitely have always been and had always been studios that have spun off of LucasArts.
Oh, for sure.
For various reasons. But when Tim left and Double Fine was started, it felt different and it felt significant. And it was a time when, unlike today, you know, there really wasn't an indie scene in the same way that we have now. The studios weren't the you know were small, and they for some of the ones that I'm thinking of that did spin off, or any of the studios from even other publishers that spun off, they usually had a very specific, I guess, like talent or leadership base that you could understand what they were going to do. So an example that comes to mind is, I think they were called 2015. What was it? 20 something.
Yeah, 2015 sounds right.
2015, yeah, the ones that the studio that did Medal of Honor Allied Assault,
right,
and spun off to create Infinity Ward, and thus Call of Duty,
right,
and
right.
You kind of knew what they were going to do.
Yeah,
we're
sure.
talking about Jason West and Vince Zappella, rest in peace.
Yeah.
And so, the point being is that, and there were some LucasArts ones of the same vein of like, oh, they made this kind of game, they're going to go and do probably that kind of game.
Yeah.
Right?
So just nihilistic, right.
Nihilistic and Infinite
years
Machine.
Before this, maybe Infinite Machine was the other one I was thinking of. But even before this, there was, the folks who did like Zombies Ate My Neighbors. That team went and did was the team that did like the Ep1 Phantom Menace that played the movie game.
Herc's Adventures as well.
And Herc's Adventures, right? Yeah, I mean, the name isn't coming to me, but I remember it was Dean and his another guy who had a cool name. His name isn't coming to me, but Stryker. Kaylee, sorry. I'm just back from a trip, so my brain's a little fried. Too much sun. But anyway, yeah. So it was definitely time for that, and there was a history of that, at LucasArts as well. So it was a good place to kind of come from in that regard. And the thing about Tim Schafer in particular is like you didn't necessarily know what he was going to do, except that it would be wildly creative.
Creative. Probably there'd be humor
off the wall,
which we're going to talk about all this stuff, and then we had him on, he and Dave Grossman on for Day of the Tentacle in our first year of the podcast.
Yeah, it could be
early.
Yep.
And that was obviously while they were at LucasArts. So, you could imagine, but am I right? Is it true that Double Fine has never made a graphic adventure game?
That is not true. They made Broken, the one that was split into two parts.
That's right. Yeah,
that was meant to be an old school, and they sort of kickstarted it that way.
Yeah, so, that's right. Yeah. What the heck?
Broken Age. It was called
Broken Age. Yeah. So that was, but even that was like had a very fresh take on how to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
And it would make sense to kickstart that because that's what you'd expect. But that's it. I mean, they've made many games over their history, and they've all been their own thing. And I just Double Fine, and then eventually they do get purchased. But Double Fine is, for me, especially starting in 2000, stands out as, kind of like an unexpected inspiration, I think, for a lot of us who, not just from ex-LucasArts people, but just like how far you can go. Now, of course, you need the Tims of the world to, they're the ones that can do that kind of thing because he is such a force himself. But of course, he would give a lot of credit to the team, and there's a lot of talented people there and have come and gone who have impacted that studio.
Yeah.
People we've worked with, people who were at Twin Suns who used to be there, so there's a lot of, but it's just a very unique studio, very unique origin story. And there are very few studios who have stayed so true to their persona, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
And that's just a rare thing.
It's also one of the most open studios that's ever been out there, in terms of being very open about their process. They originally did a want to say like a 2-week documentary, not minute by minute, but a documentary culled from like 2 weeks of footage from their one of their Amnesia Fortnite um, uh, things that they do, where they basically try to come up with a bunch of ideas. Like they had their own engine for a long time now that they've been working with Unreal Engine for a while now, but they would basically be like, take the stuff that we have, get together some like 4 teams out of this 50-person studio. They tend to sort of make 4 teams who would work for 2 weeks to make a game, and so like a game jam. But you sort of had to sell the rest of the team on your idea, and the ideas would kind of, teams would kind of coalesce around these different ideas, and they have, put out demos from those things. Sometimes those things will turn into a level that ends up in a game. That's the case with Psychonauts 2, or is its whole new game, as with Kiln, which they recently released, a multiplayer game that goes back to an Amnesia Fortnite exercise they did over the course of Psychonauts 2. And of course there's the Psych Odyssey, which is the 31 part, I believe, YouTube series, ranging in length, but it's probably a good 30 hours of watching that is riveting about the development of Psychonauts 2. So there's just they have shown kind of what goes into game development in a pretty open way. I'm sure that there are some things that they don't get to see. I know there's some things you don't get to see, but it's pretty good. It's few things have been as open as that. I mean, most sort of documentaries about video game development are the sort of like, we're going to include this on the physical release kind of puff piece. I mean, it's nice. You get to see some developers and they interview them stuff, but it is kind of a marketing material. And while it's probably still true that Psych Odyssey is marketing materials to a degree, right? It gets their name out there, and people can see this and see how the game was developed and be aware of game development in a way that they couldn't be otherwise. And that is kind of inherently marketing. It still is very, very open about the challenges of doing it, and especially in such a creative place, that makes it really, really interesting. So they just basically had 2-player productions in bed with them. So that's super cool too.
Yeah, very helps. Yeah, again, setting an example.
Yeah. And then finally, we want to at least mention, we did, when we chose this game and announced it on the Discord, the link for that later in the show notes, we did not know, and it was only a couple days later, that it would be reported in the news that Xbox / Microsoft Game Studios is considering shutting down Double Fine, or if they can find a way to do it, maybe spin them off to their own thing again. So they've been with them about 7 years, and that has allowed them to survive a bit longer. But they're definitely in a position now, and this didn't inform our decision to play this game. It was just happened to be that kind of timing. So we don't really want to focus on that, because we're here to talk about the game, but we did want to at least acknowledge that is happening as we discuss this game. So though it had nothing to do with just poor timing on our part this time. So
yeah,
it is a tough time out there. Okay, let's get into the game then. You had not played this at all before.
No.
So tell me about your initial experience playing this game.
To be honest, okay, it starts off with a long cinematic.
It does. Actually, can we talk at least about the initial screen to start a new game?
What do you mean?
You have to walk around on the brain and find the door that says new game.
I didn't do that.
Really?
How did I not do that?
Well, it's possible that's different on the PC.
Oh.
I'm playing on the PlayStation 5 from a PlayStation 4 version, I believe. So that is interesting already. Yeah, you there's at the beginning of the game, you are Raz on a brain, to create a new game?
Uh, yeah, gosh, I don't. I feel like I just selected from a menu, but I'm not.
It's possible. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? No, you know what happened? This is my confusion. When I started the game,
Uh huh.
it went directly into the cinematic.
Okay, that's possible. That's possible. Like I said,
I had no title screen.
okay.
I had nothing. It just went straight into Oleander. That's my memory, at least. Maybe
Okay.
I hit a button by accident and skipped something. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
But I was surprised by that. That's why I kind of brought up that it opens with the cinematic. I was like, oh, okay, this is starting. Okay,
Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah.
Maybe the first time you play.
Yeah. I don't know, because it's definitely different. It was definitely different for me.
Yeah.
I don't remember, because I think there is some, like, there's an attract mode as well on the console version. So like there's a movie that plays that is until you hit a button, I believe, and then you have to choose new game for me, and then or load game, I guess, when I go back in, and you're on a brain. Like when he puts the door in the center of his forehead, it's essentially like that, but the door is on this, like,
Right.
squishy brain he's running on, in a 3D brain in the level, in a map level that is
That's cool.
yeah, it's neat. All right,
Yeah,
back to your experience then. Sorry, I was like, well, yeah, but that wasn't really your experience, Tim, was it? And they were like, no, that was my experience.
Yeah. Have you played a game on the console before, on that particular console? I'm wondering if
No, because I
this was
had to buy this fresh. Yeah,
fresh account.
I
Okay.
originally played it on the original Xbox, and we all know what happened to that. So
Yeah. Right. Okay.
in fact, the reason why I bought that Xbox was to play Psychonauts.
Oh, wow. Good
Yeah.
for you. Okay. Yeah, so I appreciate that it dives right in, and gets kind of into the meat of it, and introduces you to Raz, introduces you to all the characters. The opening cinematic's very good, and stylistic and funny, and you can kind of set the tone. It also is a great opening to just kind of explain the conceit of the game and like what's going on. Establishing setting. It does all the things that you would want it to do, but in a fun way. So you're kind of, for me, I was brought into the world very quickly, and of course, one of the first notes I wrote down was just how stylistic and how pure the identity of the game is. The art style, obviously the character style. You'd mentioned, I don't remember the artist's name, but you
Scott Campbell.
Scott Campbell, right? Is he the lead artist or the art director?
He is the concept artist who came up with the whole look. I don't remember if on this game he was also. My recollection is not that he's kind of in an art director position, but I could be wrong about that. I'll try to look that up while you go.
Well, you very much see the artist's hand in the game. You know what I mean? As far as like the style of the characters and the style of the world. And there are identities, right? When you talk about Disney animation or Warner Brothers animation or any other sort of pop artist, well, any artist, of course, but pop artist specifically, there are certain identities that you can point to and say, okay, that is that kind of style. And unfortunately, we have technology now that emulates that, which we won't get into. Or Ghibli, right? Ghibli is another good example, right? Like that is a thing.
Right.
And I knew that kind of intellectually. I knew that about this game. And of course, like we just talked about, all of Double Fine's game have some sort of signature feel. And I don't just, by the way, mean art style, but just, writing style and tonal style, and even rendering to some degree. Of course, they're limited at the time, but they're making choices. But so I knew it was a stylized game, of course. Seen the cover, seen videos or whatever. I knew the basics. We knew many people who worked on the game. And I actually would go, I remember going to the studio to do early playtests before they, in the early days, before they had found the sort of pure identity for the game. But it really wasn't, it didn't sink into me then, and it was too early, I think, at the time. But it's I really enjoyed being brought into this world so holistically and being surprised at how extreme it really is. You know,
Yeah,
just looking at the character proportions alone for each individual character, which has each they all have their own anatomy, is what I
yeah,
would say.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and they brought it to life in 3D, which is like
And they have to be kind of individually animated as such, right? You know, and
different
um,
rigs probably and
yeah,
different animations. Like a lot of work went into that to make
it
such.
was actually art directed by Scott Campbell as well as him being the concept artist. The other concept artist was Peter Chan, who of course had done Grimm um,
Yeah,
and Day of the
everything.
Tentacle, tons of stuff for
Full
LucasArts.
throttle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's done. Peter Chan has done tons
He
of
did
stuff all over
Jedi
the
Knight
industry.
stuff too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
Um,
they used to have a wall outside the or in the Grim Fandango area where we later had all the Republic Commando stuff on that same wall, and it was just like this huge cork board, just tons of Peter Chan art. And I would walk over there and just kind of look around at it, you know, from time to time.
yeah.
I love that stuff.
True talent. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's so rare in 2000 or 2005 to have such a distinct distinctly different feel and look. Like there are a lot of platformers of that day, right? You have the PlayStation side, you have the Nintendo side, and of course Nintendo has its own style as well that's fairly consistent across most of their, kind of IPs. Um, and this one just kind of screams its
yeah,
own thing.
yeah. It's also
Um,
most of the characters are asymmetrical as well in terms of, you know,
yeah,
like the way their faces are set up, you know, like or just like a character might have a mouth that is a little off center and things like that. And it's like, so you can't even do a lot of the
yeah,
tricks you would do to optimize things like textures or whatever, where it's like, well, you mirror the face, right? Or something like that. You only have to do half the face in the texture because you're going to just kind of flip it and do the other half of the face with the same texture. There's just tons of things that they can't do because they choose this look. Um, so at the time on the PS2 in particular, I remember it being very muddy because they had half as much memory as on the Xbox, and so they had this is a very sort of you know texture heavy game for the time in order to achieve some of these effects. You know, the polygons aren't as much of an issue because things aren't super high poly, but they do a lot with texture, and if you have half as much texture memory, that's going to be a problem. So
I'm just in awe of the characters specifically, just because they're all so distinctly different.
yeah,
And knowing and in I guess I'd say the main cast and supporting cast have a lot of facial expressions happening in the
yeah,
cinematics too. So that means every one of them has to kind of have their own facial rig and kind of
yep.
approach. And oh man, it's like there's no reuse happening, which is the efficient game developer in me just just going
Yeah, all those
bonkers on
times where
that.
you're talking about economic design. Not going to get that here, Tim. Just going
No,
right out on a ledge
yeah,
right now. I'm
well,
telling you, this is
yeah.
more of a kitchen sink.
This is a kitchen sink, and it's gonna. We'll get to it, but and probably in further future episodes too. But it also, at least in the first level, transfers over to the level design as well, and the
Right.
level setups because it's all very, very discreet. And you could do that in the time. We've talked about that ad nauseum on the podcast.
Yeah.
The game that I thought of immediately, I talked about in pre-show that reminded me of it was Beyond Good and Evil.
Yeah.
Not obviously from a genre perspective, but just in a kitchen sink, like we're going to customly do this stuff and this stuff and this stuff, and it's not all it's not all related. It's actually just
It's not 30 seconds of fun repeated, you know, a bunch or iterated on, you know,
no.
a dozen or 1,000 times. It is everything is its own authored thing. And that includes a lot of um, lots of small cinematics or small dialogue interactions. Many of the dialogue interactions, um, some of it even has sort of dialogue choices, though they are not. They are kind of in that Monkey Island way or Day of the Tentacle way, not necessarily important. in terms of what you choose. It's, how, which funny line do you want to hear? But a lot of those setups are also like individually set up from a camera standpoint. And of course you have, to show the characters off, and you might have different, moving the camera in different places. And none of that was sort of automatable at the time, and there are games that come out much later, that big open world games that have lots of dialogue in them, but you also know, like, their characters are going to be a certain size. You can tell that they're procedurally generated cameras when you play them, because they in order to have all that stuff, they have to be able to automate a lot of that, because it's too much work to do all this. This game does all of that, which is a large part, I think, of why it took nearly 5 years to make.
Yeah, you can tell there's a lot of handcrafted stuff in here, and that's fine. That's not meant to be anything. It's just more of what it is. And the other thing that jumped out at me starting off, that I guess just because we kind of have to pit it against other platformers of the time, because it is a Double Fine game, and it is a Tim game. And this isn't to throw stones at other platformers, but the writing is impeccable. The voice acting is impeccable. The voice direction, the setting and the conceit and the story is very interesting and different. And it's not to say that Spyro doesn't have a backstory and a lore and a world building.
If it does, I don't want to know.
But it doesn't. But it has it, but it also doesn't need it. You know what I mean? It's not a. I'm not trying to criticize Spyro, or that's a random example, by the way. It's not just because a new one was announced, but Mario, it's like Mario's really good at a few things, but story and writing and character is not one of them, and they don't want it to be, and that's okay. And
it's not hurting them at the box office either.
It's not hurting them, and it's fine. I haven't seen the movies, so maybe the story's amazing and the writing's amazing in those movies. Illumination is a great studio, so Illumination does good work. So I'm glad the Mario movies are doing so well, because Illumination deserves it. Not even, in my opinion, not even because it's Nintendo, but because they're good. But yeah, it's just it to some degree for me, not being a huge platforming fan, which we'll get to that later. It was very refreshing and fun to come into such a sort of a story-driven, character-driven, and again, I'm meaning story light. It's not like a deep narrative, but it's just so well crafted in that regard, and that's just a refreshing thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we'll see happening over time is some of that writing will get deeper, and the themes will become really, really clear, which is also something you don't say about a lot of platformers. No. Although it was kind of an indie game thing after this, that a platformer, with meaning, was kind of a thing that kind of happened in the wider indie sphere, kind of after this. So it does kind of trailblaze in that way as well. But here it's doing it with a fully 3D, sort of game. So it's worth noting. Like your Brave World or whatever, have things that they want to say, regardless of how we might feel about those things.
Right. Or Celeste, right?
Yeah, or Celeste. Yeah, there are tons of them. Tons of them, for sure.
But you're right. I think it's a good point that Double Fine in general was really trailblazing.
Yeah.
For that movement. I remember I was still living in California at the time and in the Bay Area, and I remember going, I'm a good friend who was one of the co-founders of Choice Provisions. At the time was called Gaijin Games. They rebranded, and there was a small indie hub in San Francisco. Choice Provisions, Double Fine. I'm blanking on the others, but there were a few. The Super Meat Boy folks.
Sure. Yeah,
and Team Meat. And anyway, they're World of Goo. Wait,
sure.
Are they the same people? No,
they're not. Different people. Yep.
Anyway, so there were a few of them popping up in those early days, and they would all support each other.
Yeah.
and hang out, you know, and I got lucky enough to be invited to some of their gatherings and stuff. And but they all were kind of in the same boat, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the indie, we had a whole series or a whole, you know, whole multiple game series about indie games that we did. So we talked about some of that then, but this was like experiencing it and seeing them live it, you know, and trying to figure out what this all meant when it wasn't so publisher focused.
Yeah.
Um, and it was really interesting to see. And to your point on meaning in a platformer, it's the sort of thing that could happen in that context and probably is the only way it would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
LucasArts was kind of rare in that more risks were taken there, I think, than other publishers.
Yes.
But generally, you know, EA wouldn't have made this game back then.
Right. Right.
And
Or
maybe with some
even
of the
still.
struggles, even still, yeah, and maybe some of the struggles that they had with that Xbox had with, you know, with it, and why they needed to find someone like Majesco. Maybe part of it, I don't know, but um,
Well, I think in that case it was largely, the
it
original
was the
slate.
cost. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, also the original slate of games that were funded were a little bit more out there, and of course Xbox also was kind of more focusing on the hardcore kind of moniker. So
yeah,
anything
right.
that kind of didn't fit that mode, kind of I think also was, and it's easier when you come in to kind of clean house of the last guy's stuff, right? So um you don't want to be saddled with that. You want to take your money, invest it in what you want to invest it in, what your strategy is, or what have you.
Yeah, yeah,
So that happens too.
yeah,
So yeah, it's a totally a thing. I mean, I know that Tim Schafer has talked about Majesco coming in, and I do just remember at the time that being like I'm glad they found somebody to fund this thing getting finished, but also like Majesco, like it was such a
yeah.
weird thing to happen. But maybe they were thinking of a strategy change themselves. So who really knows how all of that happened? But yeah, it's a game I love for that reason. I mean, we can get into the details. One of the things I was talking about in pre-show that I love a lot about um, Tim Schafer's games, kind of broadly, and this game in specific, is that he really draws on language and ideas from the sort of setting that he's created. So in this case, you've got this. We haven't really even said, but a psychonaut is somebody who enters into another person's brain and deals with whatever problems they find there. It's sort of an espionage thing. It's sort of framed that way. But so far we haven't gotten deep enough in to kind of really know where that's going yet. We just kind of have that broadly as a framing. But what you find in there when you're inside somebody's brain is emotional baggage, which is some model of like a dancing hat box or something somewhere, which is initially crying because it's emotional baggage. It's emotional. And then you've also got to find a tag that goes with that emotional baggage and join the two together so that you can sort out that emotional baggage, right? And, that's the thing. There are figments of imagination, there are memory vaults so there's just all these like ideas that are kind of coming from psychology and psychological terms, or even pop psychology in some cases, sometimes clinical psychology, where you're just like drawing in all this stuff and it just enriches. They take all these little bits and name, parts of mechanics or collectibles or what have you, and tie rewards to them that make sense for the fact that you're sorting out somebody's emotional baggage. You might learn something about this character as a result of sorting out their emotional baggage. And I just love all that stuff. So there are rewards tied to all these sort of psychological terms. And they kind of just like really enrich the environment through really bringing in kind of the setting in a deep way and not just a very kind of surfacey way.
Yeah, it's really cohesive so far,
Yeah.
and really focused and pure in that way.
Yeah.
And again, not to pit it against other ones of its genre, but it's an easy comparison, I guess. One of the benefits I feel like of most platformers is that they get to have fun in a way of, um, you know, not having some constraints on them. So if they want to do, I'm thinking of Mario or Spyro or some of those obvious ones, but if they want to do an underwater level or a cloud level or whatever level, they just do it because the world and the context and the setting of what it is allows them to do that. Fantasy, right?
Right.
And this is a fantasy in a different way, but to your point, Tim and the team have leaned into that being a cohesive fantasy. So they have given themselves some constraints, but also when you're in someone's mind, you can also have a lot of freedom to do whatever you want to do, but it also is still within the framework of the game.
Yeah.
Which is just such a nice, elegant solution to have pure fantasy, but it all still makes sense somehow.
Yeah.
Which is also very hard.
There's going to be things, I mean, I will say that back when I originally played this, I just like every time I would go to a new level, I'd be like, I can't believe they put this in here. I can't believe they thought of this. Like level after level after level. So that's something we'll talk about as we go forward. Because so far, we both just basically played the tutorial level. I played a lot of the tutorial area. It's kind of split that way between the real world and the first brain you go into, which is Captain Oleander's, Coach Oleander now, former Captain Oleander. He's this kind of ex-military guy who is a psychonaut now, and who is sort of teaching you the ropes, through a sort of boot camp of his mind, which is it's warfare. I mean, the opening, the introductory quote this week is from something he says, that you're going to face torture, insanity, and death if you don't chicken out, because it's it's a scary environment, and at the beginning there's a kid just crying like, I don't want to do this. So it doesn't shy away from that either, of like, man, this would be really weird, right? If you went to camp and did this, that would be kind of scary, huh? So there's that aspect of it too, because all the characters, except for these handful of adults, are all, I don't know, however old you are when you go to camp. So like 10 to 12 or whatever, 8 to 14, kind of in that range.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they're so odd looking, it's hard to actually pin a age on them. But you would guess that, because some of them have braces or, are missing some teeth or whatever. So kind of have a sense of what age they are.
Yeah, they went for broke on the character designs. Yeah, it's just astounding.
Yeah. And, the other thing with those figments that I mentioned is like, there's like a whole bunch of different figments, like not every one of them is unique, but there are probably more than a dozen unique shapes that they use for the figments. So it might be, in the case of Captain Oleander, they're military. One looks like kind of an explosion. I think there's one that kind of looks like a bullet or a mortar or something like that. So there are these different shapes in the world as well that kind of are the things he imagines. Those are the figments of his imagination. So
biplane.
those are a biplane. They're different in every level as well. So it's like,
that's wild.
They get no reuse. It's not coins or rings or whatever that you can just reuse. It's the same thing a million times. It's like, sure, there's not a million unique things, but there's a whole, there's like 10 to 20 buckets of things on each level, which is also pretty wild.
Yeah, it's just that handcraftedness that we were kind of talking about that is still rare. I think the indie space owns it now, which is great. But back then, definitely rare, and just such a lovingly crafted, which again, it did take a while to come out. And it definitely went through its trials and tribulations.
They were also building their own engine for it.
That boggles my mind too, which back then makes more sense. We talked about that also with Beyond Good and Evil. And don't forget, they were building a studio.
Yeah. Figuring all this stuff out.
And all. Yeah. So you're doing a lot. It's a miracle this game came out.
Yeah. Well, a miracle and an awful lot of very late nights. This was a
Yeah,
crunch-tastic game for sure.
yeah, a lot of hard work
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
team.
This one was definitely a major labor of love from a lot of people. So don't want to discount that
Nope,
at all, because
nope.
we knew a number of people on it as well. And in fact, I went to one of the parties in there, that weird office they had that was that had like a driveway in the building. Like they had a parking lot or parking space in the building. Yeah, it was quite a wild place. They had some problems with sewage. It was a whole crazy
Yeah, it
mess.
was in the down in the heart
Yeah,
of Soma.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Uh, all right. Any other things you want to pick up from there? We kind of talked about the cinematics, the variety of sort of setups. We can start a little bit on the platforming, and then maybe just go to emails from there, because we do have a
Yeah.
few we want to catch up on.
Yeah, we should get to the emails for sure.
So we should
I
set
th-
a baseline with the platforming, because of course that's going to get added to, which is
yeah,
crazy because there's already a lot of platforming mechanics.
if that's true, that's pretty wacky to me because definitely in this first level, the variety of mechanics and platforming mechanics, I was surprised by.
Yep.
Um, I won't even attempt to list
Some
them
of
all,
them
but
are,
it's
yeah,
like,
some of them are more action adventure stuff, like climbing or swinging. Swinging, I guess, is kind of a platformery thing, but I was thinking like just climbing up a wall, like with netting on it and things like that. That's not normally.
yeah, but
Sometimes
there's
I guess that's a
poles,
platform. There's poles.
there's
Yeah,
poles, and they all have their own, their
there's
own
bouncy. There's sort of trampolines.
trampolines.
Yeah,
There's the tight ropes, which you can also grab onto like a pole,
yeah,
but they also kind of bounce a little bit. There's trapeze. There's just a lot of, which is good for a platformer. You want a lot of interesting stuff going on, but I guess I've just been surprised at Crystal. We would call them primitives.
yeah,
Each primitive. I don't know if that's a full industry term or not, but so there's just a lot going on, and it's good for a platformer. I think one of the, one of the anxieties I'm starting to feel already, though, that is maybe one of the reasons I don't play a lot of platformers, is the sort of trial and error and the skill elements of it. And when you start combining those together, which later in that tutorial level they start doing some of that,
yeah.
it gets harder and more complex, and I just, my skill maybe doesn't hold up to it. So I'm a little bit worried about that if this is the first level,
Yeah.
about just missing things at the wrong angle or whatever.
Yeah.
So the variety is great, and I think the handcrafted elements of it feel like the platforming is continuing that theme of like, yeah, we're going to add a lot, we're going to say yes to a lot, and we're going to put a lot of different options in for the players for platforming perspective. But at the same time, the foundational point that I'll put here, and that we'll talk much more about in future episodes, is it's still a little under implemented for me,
Yeah.
as far as its kind of feel and polish and that,
Yeah.
when it comes to, again, pitting it against some of the top tier platformers of the time.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's a bummer. And the camera specifically is pretty hard for me to use. I don't know if that's a PC thing or not, but it's it's also a little.
You are playing on a controller though, right?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say that one of the things that I will kind of echo with that is that some things are better than others as far as that goes. So, for example, when you're swinging to do a sort of swing and jump to another thing, they're definitely helping you there. Like you can't just release anywhere. Like you can only release once you have enough momentum to actually get to the other thing. So they actually sort of help you with those sorts of things. So like trapezes and there's sort of one that sort of looks like when you drop a coin down one of those things where it bounces off the nails or whatever, or ball off these sort of nails and everything. It's sort of structured that way where you're like trying to swing from pole to pole, and it actually helps you quite a bit with those sorts of things. But then the jumping, in general, is a little rough, and the because there's a lot of like supporting trampolines and things like that, it's not always easy to see your shadow beneath you where you're going to land.
Yeah.
So the
This is
feedback is not
yeah.
always there as well.
This is where camera is critical, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about it multiple times, but you just can't. Those all have to work together,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
And when you're
And
pushing the variety that this game is
yeah,
already
yeah,
pushing and is going to push,
yeah,
that can be extremely, extremely tricky. And it is hard to, without doing what they did in Prince of Persia Sands of Time, where they literally just scripted the cameras through the whole game. They don't do that here. Here they're trying to do basically a systemic camera, which is to say a camera where they haven't handcrafted. They might have a couple special cameras, for example, and I don't even remember if this is true, but they might try to orient the camera in such a way that you can see, oh, I'm actually kind of facing perpendicular to the navigation space as when I'm like swinging on these things, because, well, that's all on one plane, right? They're all sticking out of the same, sort of wall. So you can kind of put the camera out a certain distance and just face it at the wall, and follow the character around. But there's not a lot of that. And even that's kind of systemic, right? So they're trying to do everything with systemic cameras. And I don't think you could do it any other way in the case of this game, because the areas are pretty open. But it does mean that the camera is not always going to be what you want. So it's it's tough.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
tough.
there's that trapeze section late in the level.
Yep.
This is a good example where level design, camera design, and character design and mechanics are fighting each other.
Yep.
Kind of all of them,
Yep.
and so and it is very difficult to do that stuff. I'm
Yeah.
definitely not trying to make light of it. But I'm only saying that in that it's going to be a topic for us moving forward, and I just have a lot of anxiety and fear about it.
Yeah.
If this was the first level,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes.
It was new, of course, for Tim Schafer. He, except for the sort of time while after Grim Fandango, while he was developing a different game, where he was thinking about these things as well. Because I think Zelda Ocarina of Time was sort of the example that he had of a game that really, that the execs at LucasArts thought was, really, really well done and something to think about for adventure game design, action adventure game design. And so he was trying to figure out how to emulate some of that stuff as he started thinking about that. And of course, he went more towards a platformer instead of Zelda's action adventure, but he's tackling a lot of the same problems that you would have to there. And it's his first time, and there were a lot of people who were new to the industry on this or hadn't been in the industry very long on this project as well. So it is an interesting case study for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's a big goal to go after.
It is a big swing. We will come back to a lot of those topics in the future. I'm really interested. I just promise me as you encounter each new area, you just quickly jot down your reaction, because I think that's going to come up a lot. Because there's some that I'm just I'm thinking about now. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could be there and watch you react when you see they're doing this now, because it is pretty wild. We are going to try to catch up on some emails now. Thanks to folks sending them into devgameclub@gmail.com. We have a couple, I think, that are Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and one that kind of touches back on some other things. But why don't you go ahead with that first one, sir?
Okay, Splinters Cell, Spies, and Mercs from Ashton Herman. Hello, Ashton. Good to hear from you. Hey, Brett and Tim. I'm so pumped you guys are covering Chaos Theory, my favorite game in the series. In the early 2000s, I was the only real stealth head in my group of friends, so nobody else I knew got into the original Splinter Cell. But then Pandora Tomorrow came out and surprised us all with the Spies vs. Merc multiplayer mode. And by the time Chaos Theory was releasing, we were all champing. Good work, correct use.
Yep.
At the bit for more of it. The game mode pits two spies playing with traditional Splinter Cell mechanics and a third-person camera against two mercs armed with guns and explosives and a first-person camera perspective in an objective-oriented standoff. Spies are able to freely explore the map, crawling through ducts or climbing across pipes to hack computers or steal data MacGuffins, while mercs are armed to the teeth in order to stop them. It was asymmetrical multiplayer done in a way I'd never seen before, and my buddies and I spent many nights playing over LAN, 2 players upstairs and 2 in my basement, nice, so that we could collaborate with our teammates in real time without giving away any crucial information to our opponents, although we did try to eavesdrop plenty. That's amazing, Ashton. Oh man, those are the days. Those are the days. Online, the game gave players tools to attempt to create a similar experience. Both spies and mercs had gear that could tap into enemy comms, which worked because, as Xbox Live was still new in those days, most players were using voice chat over Xbox's built-in service. That also meant that occasionally you found yourself a voyeur to casual chit-chat, which was both odd and fascinating. You're probably putting it lightly, and probably why this idea hasn't really survived in the modern era. Well, it actually is still around, but I'm talking about it later. Yeah. As beloved as Spies vs. Merc was, it seemed the mode always lived on borrowed time. There were only so many maps and game variations, so many routes the spies could take, and so many points the mercs could defend. Eventually, it seemed the meta shifted to spies simply eliminating mercs, which they could do by getting into close range and breaking their enemy's neck. I'm running a bit longer here than I meant, so I'll stop here, but I do want to ask if y'all have any experiences with Spy vs. Merc mode, or do you have any other favorite multiplayer packing game modes from this era? Thanks as always, Ashton Herman. Thanks, Ashton. Great email.
Yeah, thank you, Ashton. Yeah, so we can touch on the voice stuff as well. I didn't then and don't now play a lot of multiplayer games. So I don't have a lot of modes that I could point at and be like, I did like the, what do they call them? Mutators that they put on games like Ultima, Unreal Tournament, and things like that, like the big head modes and things like that, where, you know, the longer you went without being killed, like the bigger your head would get and things like that. So you became a bigger target. I thought that was fascinating and interesting ways to experiment with gameplay. That kind of could be built on top of an existing mode. Like it was basically just deathmatch, but now with big heads, and stuff like that. So I enjoyed some of those things, but I don't think I played enough, you know, games at the time to multiplayer games then or since to really have favorite modes. Although we did talk about some sort of asymmetric play, you know, when we talked about the multiplayer a little bit in the episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I on the other hand play. Yeah, I mean, I always. I mean, even today, I still play. Probably less PvP than I normally would these days, but through this era, I was playing PvP constantly too. So, anything we could get our hands on. And Ashton,
were you on LEC Quake?
Oh yeah. I think I was one of the early members in the part of the
wouldn't surprise me. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
LEC Quake was the internal mail alias that occasionally went too far in its trash talk.
It had that was the name of it.
But moderated by other
but
folks.
It was well beyond Quake. But yeah, I mean, I definitely was playing multiplayer Quake 1 back, you know, and even Duke Nukem. In those early days at LEC, and that was, to Ashton's example, that was because of the LAN, right? We were already there working too much. We had this amazing opportunity to play. So, you know, I mean, Quake 2 is probably where it really was at its apex, I would say, where we were playing basically every night and sometimes at lunch and maybe too long of a lunch. You know, that's where, yeah, your cube mates, there's a lot of yelling going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as, like, you know, the voice, like, this mode was ahead of its time. I did play this mode back when it came out. We played it. I don't remember who I was playing it with, but it was in the office. I didn't play it from home, but it was in a LAN situation because we really were wanting to see what this mode was all about. But I think the setup that Ashton talked about was way better of a way to play it.
Yeah, that's
and the dabbling with the voice over IP stuff is also really interesting. It isn't obviously as used these days because of the toxicity issues out there, but there still are some who dabble. Early Hunt Showdown, it still technically is in Hunt Showdown, but most people turn it off. But there are still games out there that try to make it work. And the ones that most recently I would call out that are having a good success with it are more in the co-op space that I can think of, especially in the new kind of friend slop space.
Sure.
As an example, Repo and Peak have it. And it's by the way, the better way to play it. Don't use Discord for those games because as you get further away from your teammates, you obviously can't hear them.
Right.
And there's an echo, like if you're in certain places. So like if you're in a canyon, you can yell and it echoes and it, kind of gives you more of a sense of, So it's still alive and well, but yeah, the competitive element of it is pretty tricky in the internet of today.
Yeah.
But the asymmetrical of this mode was really brilliant. And I think Ashton's totally right in that you really need to double down if you're going to do this. And support it heavily, and they didn't know that at the time because the concept of live, what is how many modes do we need to come out with? How many maps do we need to come out with, right, for this to be living
and
on
post-release, support, was
that's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, once it's going, like, how do we support it? And this was kind of a bolted-on thing, and in fact, not to get into too much of the details, that's sort of part of the concept behind our game was, what if you started with multiplayer and focused on multiplayer? What would you get in a spy game? So we did that.
I will say also a game at the time that did have a sort of asymmetric play was Outlaws, and that was just in that depending on what character you played, they had a different weapon that they were better with. Like they had did more damage or whatever. So if you played the Marshal, I believe the rifle was his preferred weapon, and you would do more damage with that weapon if you had it. So you kind of choose the character to go with the weapons you preferred. You could use any weapon, but you would pick the ones that you liked as a result. And it was based on a lot of the sort of bosses for each level were, I guess, the characters, and they all had their sort of thing. There was a guy who loved dynamite. There was the native character who liked the knife. So he was like an up and close character, etc. So I'm sure there was a shotgun as well, but I don't remember who was good with it. So that's another thing I remember at the time being, it's not really fully asymmetric, but there was some asymmetry there.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about this mode that I was impressed that they were willing to try it is, multiplayer. I mean, we probably talked about it in the Republic Commando series because we added multiplayer to that game too, kind of later in development. Multiplayer was a thing everyone was trying to crack and trying to find a way to strong arm it into their franchise. And if you just started with everyone as a Sam Fisher, you can imagine that being weird and not probably working that well.
Yeah,
because it wasn't really designed to do that. So I really applaud them for thinking outside the box and saying, okay, we definitely need someone to play Sam Fisher or a couple.
Right.
What if, right, we give the opponents that they would normally have in single player to other players, and I'd be fascinated to know the genesis of that concept, because you still get that fantasy fulfillment, but then the challenge is you need to make sure that the mercs are just as fun to play, right? And that's where the slippery slopes start coming in. But pretty cool. I'm glad. Thanks for Ashton telling that story because brought back some good memories.
The other one I think about at the time, I guess, was AVP.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Alien versus Predator versus, I think you could also
I played a lot of that too.
You play a Marine, right, as well. So
play all three.
Yeah,
it was like StarCraft, but first-person shooter. And the Alien. The alien gameplay was so different.
Yeah, you ran along the walls, and it had a different
fisheye
look.
lens.
Yeah, fisheye lens, right? Yeah,
yeah.
camera, first person camera.
FOV.
Yeah,
Very
totally
cool.
wild. Yeah,
very cool.
And of course, you could be invisible as the predator, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, a whole different sort of thing. I didn't play a ton of it, but I remember it at the time being a thing. All right, I have one here that is not related to Splinter Cell. It's I'm thinking it was more like a review just because it's not tied to recent discussion. The subject is inventory Tetris. It is from Matthew. Sorry, I've got some neighbors yelling outside.
I hear them.
Yeah. Normally it's the dogs. Now it's my neighbors. It says, "Hi, Brett and Tim. Thoroughly enjoying the podcast. I've been listening for a while, but not in any sort of order. I randomly pick games that interest me at the time. Something that came up in a couple of games, Diablo and Animal Crossing, and there's an odd crossover, was the annoyance and purpose of inventory restrictions, something I'd blogged about yonks ago. And there's a link here, which I'll put in the show notes once I've read. In summary, with my formative gaming years being adventure games, Sierra, etc., my perspective is that inventory is an abstraction of remembering that you saw an item elsewhere, because the backtracking just to get it is not interesting gameplay. A restricted inventory is relevant in games where there's interesting risk reward and choosing whether or not to go back. He says here, I appreciated your insight about the restriction also forcing the player to change what they're doing. There are times we could all use some help breaking cycles of behavior. Keep up the good work, Matthew." Thank you, Matthew. I mean, we have not played a sort of inventory forward game in a little while, but that is a good point, that if there isn't something interesting to do and go get the object, you might as well just be allowed to carry them. Whereas in an environment where there is a risk reward, or at least just risk, of going back, whether or not you keep something in your backpack, I would say it's a good restriction, certainly in a horror game, in a Resident Evil game, because the fact that you can't carry everything means you have to really think about where you are in relation to a save place, or how long it's been since you've seen one, a typewriter or what have you, and whether you want to change what you're carrying as a result. Because usually there's a bigger crate in there that you can kind of switch up later. But yeah, you might not be able to carry all those green herbs. Maybe it's time to mix them up with some yellow herbs or what have you. So it's a whole thing with those sorts of games. So
yeah. It's a good topic, and thanks for bringing up those two games too. It is a funny combination. It's inventory. We were joking in one of our friend groups. Brett wasn't there, but I was playing co-op with some folks, and we're playing a game that I won't mention that has inventory restrictions. And we just kind of, we're all ex-game developers or current game developers, and so we always kind of go off on tangents about things that we are not liking at the moment, of like, what is this? And then what would we do differently? And then we kind of got into this topic of there should be more games just about inventory. And there are a few out there that I think that are just kind of like the inventory game, but we really went deep and, just like what ifs. There's some good indie games out there that I'm blanking on the names of, but I know that they exist. But I think inventory is such a great example of a system that always feels like a vestigial element that needs to be in games, but to his point, and to their point, it isn't a default. There needs to be a good reason. And I am reminded by a quote from Harley Baldwin, a colleague of ours who we worked with for many years.
And former interview.
And former interview and former Twin Sons team, still spiritual team member. And she would just, a big part of our game, but a big part of our kind of design thinking is around getting the player into a place where they have to make hard choices. And she would constantly talk about player needs to make hard choices. And whether it's a survival horror game, to your point, or Diablo or Animal Crossing, or to their point about like an interesting reason to go back to get something, whether it's a puzzle, or oftentimes inventory is something that is used to create a loop for the player. The obvious one in Diablo is we want this loop of they have to go back to town. So that creates other things like a town portal, or that create, so things cascade from there. You don't need to make them go back to town, but you do want them to, because if they're in a dungeon for 40 hours, it
Right.
would, it messes with the pacing of the game. So inventory is a way to help do that. Or to your point on survival horror, it changes the way that you think about resources and fear. And so it makes you make hard choices.
Right.
And
Some games, of course, you might die and lose all those resources, and you can go recover them.
I'm not saying it out loud.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Okay, all right. We all know what we're talking about. What I think I know what you're talking about. But yeah, that's a great example. That's a great example. Like, holy cow, escalating the value of what you had on your person.
Yeah.
And having to start over. So, I mean, yeah, I guess in a way that's sort of roguelike bread and butter.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a great topic, and it's just from a game designer perspective, it's a confounding topic for game developers across the world.
Yeah. Yeah, anything like that is, I mean, it's one of those things you can always go into a genre, and I can't remember. I feel like we've talked with somebody about this in an interview, where it's like a good thing to do when you go in to make a game that's in a specific genre is look at the defaults and ask whether you should change some of them.
Yeah.
Because there might be some gold there, like, for example, I mean, a good example in the past is that going up until sort of console first person shooters, especially with Halo, but in Doom and in Quake and all the other games kind of that era, you could just carry however many weapons they designed for the game, like 7 or 9 or whatever it was, right? And so it's because you were playing on a mouse and keyboard, because they were PC games. You just had all these number keys, and you just would pick the weapon that you wanted from that. And you just were carrying all the ones, and if you had ammo for them, you could wield them. And then it was an interesting choice to be like, what if you could only pick up 2? What if you only ever had 2 at one time? And then of course some other types of attacks, but it changed the feel of how a first person shooter would feel, and it was a better match as well for the for the controller. So it's another interesting choice. So there's always something to be had by re-examining those things. What if only one thing? What if you have to pick the one thing for the whole run? Etc. So there's always interesting things to think about there. Okay, one more email.
Splinter Cell. Oh, Splinter Cell and Octavia from Moss. Hello, Moss. Thanks for writing in. Hey, Brett and Tim. Tim mentioned somewhat cheekily during episode 3 of Splinter Cell Chaos Theory that he loved gadgets, and that the both of you were making a game that had some gadgets in it. I know that there has been some secrecy around private discussions between your teams as you make the game, but what can you tell us about how games like this inform the decisions you make in Octavia? Are there things you want to steal? Things you want to outright avoid? I imagine both, and everything in between. Is there anything specific that stands out in any direction in terms of what this game is causing you to feel about your own game? Thanks, Moss.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think the thing I think a lot about is, our game had some elements of sort of around special abilities, and to some degree they are not too dissimilar. I mean, basically in Splinter Cell, Sam can see in the dark. I mean, he can't really, but he can. You can as a player. And that's like an interesting thing. We have similar sorts of special abilities where it's like, oh, you can for a short time see through a wall. It's not an always on sort of thing. It's sort of a cool down kind of thing. But those are the sorts of things that we think about, and then try to find cool. I mean, we're not sort of stealing directly in that way, but it is kind of like, well, what are things that you can't, that other players won't be able to do that you can do that is special as this character, for example? Or how do you differentiate this character in some other way when you're doing sort of this character-based, sort of stealth spy game? That's for me a big thing, is like, are there cool things we can do that might be a little too powerful if you could use them all the time, and how do you pull them back in and that's a thing I feel like we didn't steal it from Splinter Cell, but it's definitely kind of in the mix. But you're more the designer than I am.
No, I think that's a good one, and that one relates heavily to the PvP mode of the game, right? Because you want to balance
Right.
those special abilities. Yeah, I mean, what we would call, on our, I guess, on the team at large, but specifically in our design team, being, leadership wise, myself, Harley, and Troy Mashburn, who we haven't had on before, but
No, he was busy. He was busy when we were at Republic Commando.
But anyway, yeah, the what we would call the gadget system, which is sort of this very light crafting system where you kind of create your own gadgets. We have the special abilities that Brett's talking about that are per character, but we also have a gadget system that. And to Moss's question, as I mentioned on the Chaos Theory series, I hadn't played Chaos Theory before the series, but I'd played the others. But they're doing similar things to Thief and other games, right? So we had our inspirations already there, and I'd played Splinter Cell games beyond Chaos Theory, but the concept of having these player-driven tools that you can use in the environment, and having the environment and the enemies interact with them in really interesting ways to give that sort of immersive sim light feel was definitely a goal that we stole from these other stealth games that we love. The one thing that we avoided, though, that was in our original pitch, and I remember typing it out very, very clearly, and we weren't sure it was going to work, but I think we did find a way to do it. I think we still have some things to fix when it comes to usability, but it did end up working. Is the one thing that I wanted to try to avoid personally, that I think Harley and Troy would agree with me on, is we wanted to give the gadgetry usage much more agency over to the player. And in Splinter Cell's case, they really lean into the level design of it all to be able to say, this is a place where you can use this gadget or that gadget, and maybe you can combine them in some interesting ways sometimes to outsmart the AI. But we really tried hard to make both you can create your own gadgets and combo them in interesting ways, and that's completely player driven. And we also were trying not to tell them how to use them once you did create them. Ironically, this also relates to the inventory email, because we also have intentionally, and this is why Harley would always talk about this, we've intentionally limited your inventory. So you have to make hard choices about what to bring with you when you find new pieces of gadgets, new components. So basically the thing we definitely wanted to steal from the best when it comes to giving those opportunities, but we also didn't want to prescribe to them how to use them. So we try to create a more flexible kind of player agency focused system that was a lot more dynamic. And we're only, to be honest, we have many more ideas and designs that we all want to do beyond what we have in there. But even what we have is we feel like we've found some cool.
I mean, the meta, one thing that was really cool about it in development, to the point that we are, is that the meta was constantly shifting around. If we added something new, there might be several metas that we didn't think of that would derive from that. And so there's certain things that, we have an alarm object, for example, that you can also make a triggered alarm. So you could make an alarm that you throw and it goes off immediately, or you make an alarm that goes off when somebody comes in proximity, or you can activate it yourself. And there's so many ways to use that very simple object, that you can specifically set one, kind of a hidden place where somebody might not notice it, may not have an Owen with them, but it'll, that there's a guard nearby that it'll pull in if they get close to something that they're going to want to get to. For example, one of the computers you have to do, or you could be up high and be able to throw these things down low into these kind of more open spaces where people often can get through pretty easily, but not if suddenly the guards are going to run in there, and stuff like that. So there ends up being just like tons and tons of uses for these objects that we didn't know when we made them that they were going to do.
That's the goal. Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to know to some degree, but it's making those atomic objects. Yeah.
Yeah, we just want to make sure they're balanced.
Yeah, that's the trick. Yeah, but it's a great point that if the meta ever is stagnant, then something's wrong, right? You
Right.
want to always make sure that there's something that the player can do to be creative. And to be fair to chaos theory specifically, there's a lot of unexpected things that players can do that I'm sure the development team didn't intend, and that's part of the immersive sim beauty of that game, I can tell. But there also is a wide tunnel of options that they know about, right? And we tried to make that not a tunnel at all, and it's pros and cons to that, but we definitely were inspired and stealing from the best.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
for sure.
And we're by the way, back to your point about open development, Moss and Moss has been around and been vocal about and asked us questions before. We actually don't have much secrecy around Octavia. It's
at the moment
we're talking about it. I wouldn't say we have had an official announcement per se, though we do talk publicly about it. But you can ask us anything, and most likely we'll answer the question.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for those. Of course, I mentioned up top that those were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. And we love also to get your reviews. I actually didn't check today to see if we had any new ones. If we do, we'll read them out next week. I get the Apple ones, but if I don't read yours on the air, maybe shoot us an email and let us know where you posted that. And I know a lot of the different apps and things have, whatever their thumbs ups, etc. We'd love it if you could spread the word that way. We're on the web at devgameclub.com, and my co-host Twitch is at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
But taking a little break right now, I think. I
am.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll see how it goes. So maybe look to that later in the summer. Yeah. We'll come back. We'll circle back to it each week and update. Or you can check the bot on our Discord. There is a link to that in the show notes.
Good segue.
Yep, thank you. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by the immortal Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, that Discord and bot, our merch store, all by Mark Garcia. Have fun running around in the sunshine this week, and good night.
Good night.